I'm Elaine. I work at Fastly. I head up community here. We're a very cool CDN. We're hiring if you are interested. We also host some cool open source projects. If you are into that kind of thing and you need some help from a CDN, let us know. So welcome to the San Francisco Perf Meetup. It's the first one in a couple months. That's cool. This is our new community space and event space. So if you guys run a meetup and want to do something with us, please do let me know, community@fastly.com. And yeah, if you have any topics or want to do a talk in a few months for this meetup, please also contact the organizers. So here's Peter. He's all the way from Sweden, and he's going to talk about how to Dockerize your WebPerf tools.
You know, today we should have had, okay, so now it seems to work. Yeah, okay, so you know, this is Wesley, but he's homesick. Yeah, so he couldn't make it today, but I will talk about Dockerizing web performance tools, and specifically SiteSpeed I/O. My name is Peter. My Twitter name is Solislav, and my email address. So, I work at a Wikimedia Foundation. I just started 2 weeks ago, and I'm from Sweden, and I built a tool called SiteSpeed I/O. So, Sweden, you know? Do you know these guys, ABBA? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have done quite much good things from Sweden. You know, we have the smörgåsbord, do you know that? Where you can pick whatever food you want. And, you know, we have Spotify, Skype, Robin, a lot of good things from Sweden, right? But there's one thing that we do the best in the world, actually. And maybe someone knows? What are Swedes' best? Sorry? Okay. So we actually do instructions the best way, right? Okay, yeah, you know that? Yeah. So even though that we maybe aren't so good at instructing people how to do things, I will try to do my best tonight about these kind of tools. So please jump in. If you have any questions, you can just wave your hand and you can take your questions. So let's talk about performance. You know, Steve Souders has these kind of rules that when he investigated the top sites in the world, and he found out that 80 to 90% of the end user performance response time is spent on the front end. You know that is an old thing, right? But what we forget is that what does it really mean to us? And what does it really mean to front end developers? So do we have any front end developers here tonight? Is it just me? Yeah, a couple of ones. And what's really, really cool about it, you know, since we have the ability to make really fast websites because it is the front end that actually makes a site really fast. So we have the actual power, right? We are like the lightning because we can make things happen. We are like Pippi Longstocking. We are as strong as her because we make sites really, really fast, right? We're like Jesus. But there's one thing that is really important, you know? Since we have the power, we will not be evil, right? With great power, do you know the next thing? Yes. With great power comes great responsibility. And if we build the front end and we make it fast or we make it slow, what is our responsibility? We need to monitor the performance, right? So we can say if it's fast or if it's slow. Okay. So usually, when I talk about performance and I say something like this, okay, how many developers do we have here? How many front-end developers? Everyone waves their hands. And then I ask the next question, how many of you guys are actually monitoring your performance? Yeah, sadly, not so many, right? But maybe we're going to change that tonight. But do you know why it's important to monitoring the performance? I'm going to tell you a story. Have you heard a story about the emperor's new clothes? So there's a child story about an emperor that he wants to look as fancy as possible, you know? And he meets a couple of guys that says, okay, we have some really, really great clothes for you. It's super expensive, And the really fine thing, it's the best clothes in the world, and the really fine thing about it is that if you wear it, only people that are really smart will see them. So stupid people, they will not see these kind of clothes, but they are so good, right? Yeah, and he says, oh, really good to have really nice clothes. So he bought them, and then he takes them on, and yeah, you see, he don't have any clothes. But people inside the city, they will not say anything at all, because you don't want to be stupid, right? You want to be smart, yeah? So there's one guy, a little kid, that actually say, oh, hello, you don't have any clothes, right? And that little kid, that is our monitoring tool that helps us tell us how fast our site is, right? So, about our toolbox. Today, I'm going to talk about SiteSpeed.io, the tool I built, and we're going to talk about Grafana, Graphite, and also WebPageTest that we can use. So, have anyone used SiteSpeed.io? Yeah, a couple of months, great. I'm just going through a couple of things so we all know what it is. So it's built in Node. You can test the best practice rules of your site, web performance best practice rules. It gets timings from the navigation timing API and user timings if you use that. And you can get page metrics like how big is your JavaScript files, how many JavaScript files are you using, and stuff like that. You can use it on a command line. You can use it online. It's a beta version. There's a Grunt plugin, a Gulp plugin. You can use it in Jenkins, and there's a Docker version. Yeah, and it actually looks something like this. So it's not so complicated, but yeah, this is how it looks like. So we're going to use SiteSpeed to just collect information about the site, right? So SiteSpeed will collect a lot of metrics. So you will see how your site is doing. By default, it will drop all the metrics to an HTML file, but it has JSON files, and it can send it to Graphite. Have everyone used Graphite? Yeah, a couple of months. So Graphite is a way to, from the beginning, it was a way to store metrics and graph them. And it's really easy. So you create your key, that this is my metric. You send the metric number or value and the timestamp, and it will store it. So it's quite simple. The look and feel of Graphite is quite old and not so nice. So there's actually a Swedish guy that built another tool called Grafana. That's a way to actually make it look much, much better. So we have three things, and we put it in 3 different Docker containers. And then what's cool about Docker is that it's really easy to deploy, and you can put it anywhere you want. So the first container. We have SiteSpeed, but if you want to collect metrics, you want to do it in real browsers, right? So we have Firefox and Chrome, and we have XVFB, like a virtual frame buffer, so you can run the browsers without as headless, right? So we have one container containing that. With that, we can fire it away, start it, and collect metrics for a URL. Using SiteSpeed, you can feed it with one URL, a couple of URLs, or you can crawl a site. So it's a couple of different ways of doing it. So you can collect the metrics. You access a site, see how, collect the navigation timing, see how fast it is, and how many JavaScripts are we using, and compare it to different web performance practice rules. We send it to Graphite, so we store it, and we make the graph. So that's quite simple, right? How many people use WebPageTest today? Here? Yeah, quite a lot of people. And WebPageTest is super great, and it's really, what I like about it is the speed index. So speed index is that you take a video shot of how the screen is rendering, so you can get a good metric of how fast above the fold content is delivered, right? So you can actually use WebPageTest together with SiteSpeed. SiteSpeed drives WebPageTest. WebPageTest, the bad thing about WebPageTest is that the agents run on Windows, right? So Windows can be a little bit problematic, but you can use Amazon if you want, so you can just deploy your own version on the Amazon cloud, and you can use SiteSpeed to drive it. So you can get speed index and other metrics that WebPageTest is really good at. So installation. Have everyone used Docker? Yeah, a couple of us? Good. I'm just going to go through it really fast. So, getting down or downloading a Docker container, you just do docker pull. So what we need to do is 3 things to just download it on our machine or on our server. What I'm going to show tonight, I just deployed it on the DigitalOcean. So I have 2 servers, one running Graphite, Grafana, and one running SiteSpeed.io, just to collect the metrics. So you just do docker pull, just do docker pull Grafana, and docker pull SiteSpeed.io. And we have everything we need. So we have the environment we need and everything is finished. So it's quite easy. But now you have it downloaded on your server or your computer, and then you need to start it. So there's 2 things with Docker that you need to know, or many things, of course, but two things that are basic. So you see the V, the volume. When you're running Docker and you collect data, you want to make sure that the data are stored outside your container, because when you remove your container, you will still have, you want to have the data, right? So with the volume that we have there, the V, we are going to tell Graphite to actually store the data that we get into Graphite outside the container. So if we remove the container, we will still have the data. So we just tell Graphite to store the data on our server that we're running. And if we want to change configuration on our Docker container of the different tools that we have in our container, we do the same thing. So we can map different configuration files inside our container. So this means on my server or my machine, I have a password file. And when I start my Docker container, I want it to exchange it or put it in that path. So when you download the Docker container, it will have one password, but you can change it yourself. And whatever configuration you want, you can look into the container, what configuration you have for Graphite, or if you're running an Index or whatever, and you can change it that way. So you have the volumes, and you have the P, where you can actually map the port between your server and your container, so you can actually reach the container. So that's what you need to know, actually. So you start Graphite, you start Grafana, and then you can fire away a lot of different configurations. But yeah, so now you can set password and whatever you want for Grafana, but it's quite easy. And when you have Graphite, where you store the metrics, and you have Grafana up and running, you can access Grafana, and you can, using the web GUI, you can configure it to reach Graphite and pick up the data. So you need to do 3 things. You start Graphite, you start Grafana, and you can configure it. So then you can actually, you have somewhere where the metrics are stored, and you can show it. And the 3rd thing is you need to actually run SiteSpeed.io. So this is just simple where I use the cron tab. So, you know, the cron tab. So you just say, okay, run Docker, run the container called SiteSpeed.io, and SiteSpeed has a lot of different configuration that you can use. So here I say SiteSpeed, you need to pick up the URLs from a text file, where you put in the URLs that you want to test. You say, use Firefox and test every URL 11 times, and then you can set a lot of different things. So there's quite much configuration, but just to get something up and running, you feed it with a URL or a couple of URLs, and the pages will be tested. Yeah, so this is an example of the configuration. So one thing that is good with SiteSpeed is that you can actually configure almost everything. What's bad about it, maybe it's a lot to go through and understand. So, okay, so we have a way of actually storing the data, we can graph it, and we can collect it using SiteSpeed or using WebPageTest. But what should we monitor? There's one guy called Donald Trump that say, I like to think big. So we want to monitor everything, right? And that's good in a way, but I think when you start doing something, if you haven't monitored your site or at all before, I think you should think small. You should just try, you should collect the data, but you should use a couple of metrics, because you need to understand your site and see what it really matters to you. But what more? What should we actually collect? Third-party scripts. Do you know the definition of a third-party script? Yeah. I think Guy Pod has a good definition. So, infrastructure and code managed by someone else. So, for example, if my site have a Facebook plugin or something from Twitter that someone else manage, that's a third-party plugin. And when you look at a third-party plugin, first, yeah, maybe it isn't so bad. It looks a little bit like Vladimir Putin, but yeah, it's okay, right? It's a third-party plugin. It should work. Then you look a little bit closer. Yeah, there's something a little bit strange here. I don't know. And then you look really, really close. Yeah, oh, it's Vladimir Putin. So I'm a little bit scared. And what should we do? If we have a third-party script, what should we do? There's one thing everyone should do, I think. So, if we have third-party tools or scripts on our site, we need to monitor them, because we need to know how fast they are and if they are in some way bad for our performance. And here's an example of, you can actually reach it if you go to dashboard sitespeed.io. You can find it there. There's an example where I test a couple of airline sites, so just for collecting data. And what I do here is I categorize the different requests we do. So we categorize them by domain, so we can find out how much of our requests are actually from our domain and from other domains. So we can keep track of it over time. And that is good, because where I worked before, I had marketing teams that started adding things all the time. And it's a good way for me as a developer to actually keep track of what are we having on our site in production. And we're also measuring, like, of the total page weight, how much of the weight are from third-party scripts and from our sites, and the same thing as with how much time is spent downloading it. Yeah, and then you can order it by domain, so you can see if we have any domains that are really slow, or even by request. So it's easy for us to say to our marketing team, okay, do you see that the request from that plugin or whatever you're using are really slow? And this kind of thing, what we do, we run SiteSpeed on a couple of URLs, we collect the data, and then we just graph it. So we store all the data, and then you can choose yourself how you want to graph it, because Grafana is super easy to use, and you can even go to this site and you can take the configuration and use it if you want. So it's quite easy. But it's good, because it's good to keep track of how other people's code, what kind of impact it has on our site, right? Yeah. So we can monitor that, and we can also monitor our competition, and I think that's quite cool also. So in this example, I test 4 different sites, and I think it's like 3 or 5 URLs on each site. And it's a way to just see how are we doing compared to our competitors. And you can use the standard things like collecting first bit from Chrome, or you can fetch the navigation timing API metrics. But what I really like about it is that you also collect things like how many JavaScripts are we using, how many requests are we doing. So when we built our site, we can compare us to other sites and see if we are thinking the same way as they do. So, for example, we can see that we can compare the page size, we can compare number of requests, and so on. And backend time, frontend time, and we can see that maybe our competitors has a problem with the backend and stuff like that. Can be interesting. And of course, you can also do things like how many third-party scripts are we using compared to our competitors. So it's good to compare or check third-party scripts, also compare with our competitors, but of course we want to check our page. Yeah.
On the previous slide, so what time frame is used?
So in Grafana, so when you set up Graphite, you can actually configure how long time you want to store the data. So for example, you can define your keys and how long time you will store the data and how it will aggregate it. So you can store it for 1 year, a couple of years, or define that. But then when you look at the data, I will show it later. You can actually choose like the last couple of 10 minutes, last days, last 30 days, and that's built into Grafana. So you can choose whatever. So it's a drop down actually. So.
So this result there is the 7-day period.
Yes, yeah, but you can just change it and you can go back and look at it for 30 days or 1 day or, yeah. Okay. So, but then we also, of course, we want to compare or keep track of our own pages. So usually, some sites at least have a couple of pages that are really, really important, right? So then it's good to actually have your own dashboard for these kind of pages. So then you can measuring things like, time spent back in the front and different metrics. So, but how I used it before, so I worked with companies where we had like a big team of content handlers that were actually putting content on our site. And me as a developer didn't know what kind of things we were actually running in production right now. I built the code, but I didn't know exactly how things are doing. And this is a way to actually keep track of things, so we can see things if our content team or someone else is updating things, and we can see what actually is happening in production. And I think that's quite nice. So then you can build graph for one page, but you can also build graphs for many pages, so you have a summary of a site. So for example, you can set up site speed to test 5 pages, or you can crawl the site and maybe test 100 pages, and you get a summary. So you can see how are we doing with our most important 100 pages or something like that. So you can set up dashboards where you actually can go down to specific pages, but you can also get a summary, like a nice way to see how are we doing on the most of our pages. So, and built into Grafana, you can also set limits. So for example, we have a backend time there that is yellow, so you can define the limits on when you want to show it red, green, or yellow. So it's easy for the people that actually look at the graphs. And what's good about it is, what's good about graphs, I think, it's so easy to tell people or show people that aren't so technical, that say, okay, something has happened and we are not being as fast as before. And we can actually show it with the graphs, and I think that's really good. And you see, the American Airlines isn't doing so good in the different metrics. Yeah, so there where we actually can change the time span. So it's good. So you can set up your own limits. So depending on your site, what you think is the goal that you should have, how many requests or what timings you want, you can just define it in Grafana. And you can show the rest of the world or your team when you reach the limits or when it's good and when it's bad. Yeah. So I talked about the navigation timing API, and you know about that since we're like a web performance group, right? But you can also run custom metrics. Both SiteSpeed.io and WebPageTest has it. Custom metrics, first we have the user timings. There's a user timing API where you as a developer can pinpoint in your code and mark things and say, okay, this is an important thing. I need to know the time when it's happened. So by using the user timing API, we will add marks and collect the data. So tools like WebPageTest, SiteSpeed.io, or Google Analytics will collect the data, and you can see it. So for example, I don't know if you see it's quite small, but at this site, I collect the time when the actual logo is loading on the site and when the header has loaded. So you can create your own metrics, because depending on how you built your site, maybe you have metrics that are really important for you. And then you have the custom metrics, and that's a way of running JavaScript inside the browser and returning it. So you can, if you have something specific for your site, you can run some JavaScript and collect the data. So for example, here I just added the JavaScript that I run on each and every site that gets the average DOM depth of each and every page. But you can do whatever. Some people maybe have some specific JavaScript things that you collect and some important numbers that you want to know about your site. And then there's a way to actually collect it. And by using SiteSpeed.io, it will automatically be sent to Graphite. So you have that metric so you can use it. And also if you use WebPageTest. Yeah, WebPageTest and Pat. So let's see. So you can use WebPageTest, and it's good because you have the speed index, and using it with SiteSpeed, it will collect the data from WebPageTest and send it to Graphite. So you can graph things like time to first byte and first view and repeat few times and so on. And this is for new times, I guess. Yeah. And what's good about WebPageTest also that we miss in SiteSpeed.io is that you can script things. So you can actually do, like, you can log in to a page and then do a couple of accesses and then measure how long time the last page actually takes to load. So you can measure things for a logged in user, and that's quite good. Yeah. So, and the next thing we can do, it's up to you. So what's really cool about it, since we're using Docker and we use Graphite, and Graphite is like a place where you can store your keys and your values, so you can send every metric you want to Graphite, right? I have one example here where I just have a Docker container that talks to Google Analytics and collect the data for number of page views. But you can use whatever kind of data or metric you or system you want, and you can just dump it to Graphite, and you can graph it together with Graphite and Grafana, and then you can use it with the timing metrics that you have from SiteSpeed.io. Nothing fancy, but you can build it yourself. So, I'm going to do a summary. Front-end developers, superheroes, you know, right? We decide if the site are going to be fast or not. That's important. But we need to be responsible, right? And how are we responsible? So we follow best practice rules, and we try to make the site as fast as possible. But to be really responsible, right? Do you know this guy? Do you know the guy in the back? Anyone? Yeah, but his character? Yes. Sorry? Yeah, he's the consigliere. And the consigliere is a man, so here's the godfather, and the consigliere helps him. He tells him, like, helps him out with the right decisions and so on. And he is your monitoring tool, right? So that's really good. You need to have some kind of tool. You can purchase a tool, you can use a open source tool, whatever. But you need to have some kind of tool that actually help you with this, I think. And you can see the dashboards are done at dashboard.sitespeed.io. So you can access it, and the containers are on Docker, so you can download it yourself and try it out. And there's documentation at sitespeed.io where you can actually see how to do it. Yeah, so now it's time if you have any questions. Yeah.
I have two questions. So first, do you currently have a way to correlate this with specific commits?
Yeah, so built into Graphite, you can actually do a curl and tell it when you actually did a commit, or when you actually did something. So I usually use it when we do a release. So you can actually fire away a HTTP request and say, okay, I did a release, and then you will actually have that pointed out in your graph. And then you can set a label on it and so on. But that's built into Graphite and Grafana, so you can actually do it. So that's quite nice. And yeah.
Yeah, my second question is if you can change, or how to go about changing the weights of the grades.
Sorry, if you?
Change the grade weights.
Yeah, yeah. So inside SiteSpeed.io, I use YSlow, and the YSlow rules. I have like a tweaked version and a little more modern version, but you can actually build them yourself. So what you need to do is you need to download the YSlow on GitHub, and you can rebuild it yourself. Or actually, you need to do it in my branch. But you can write your own rules if you want, and you can set your own weight, because the rules are also weighted. So a rule have how important it is, and you can change how important it is. So you can change it depending on what kind of rules that you think are important for your site. So one problem today is that not so many tools actually are able to measure HTTP2. So SiteSpeed.io, if you run it with, if you want to collect a HAR file, we use a proxy for that, and that isn't supporting HTTP2. So if you use SiteSpeed to get real numbers for a HTTP2 site, you need to turn off the proxy, and then you will not get a real HAR file. If you use WebPageTest, if you are using Speedy, you will not get a HAR file from Firefox. It will not work. So using Speedy and HTTP2, there are some things that aren't working the best way today. But hopefully in a couple of months or so, let's see.
What's your preferred way of adding alerting on top of this?
Yeah, so the people that builds Grafana says that they are going to add alert into Grafana, and when that happens, I think that's really good. I think there's a tool built from BBC, I don't remember its name. It's open source that are built that you can use on top that actually will alert, but I haven't used it. So with my last company, we have used it, but we have used also like Keynet and stuff like that. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you save the results and benchmarks that you can compare against from bill to bill, so that if you set a performance budget, the next bill is not violating?
Yeah. So into SiteSpeed.io, it's built-in performance budget. But what's bad with it? So it's good in a way. You can set your limits, and if it goes below that limit, it will break. So if you're using Grunt or Gulp, or if you run it command line, or if you use Jenkins, you can break the build if you want. And that's good in a way. But the best way, I guess, would be if you are doing worse than last time you tried. It would be nice to actually be able to break your build, because sometimes it can be hard to actually set hard limits, you know, or at least in my experience, it could be, for some projects, it's hard to just say, okay, if we go below that number, we will break, and that's what we support today. But it would be nice to actually support if we are doing worse than we did yesterday, then it would be nice too. But we don't have that today. Yeah, so it depends, I think. So, for example, how often do you deploy? And will you test on so I've used it both in production and on our station environment and so on. So if you use it on a station environment, you can trigger it by when you build, or every hour, or what you think is best. If you're doing, yeah, it depends on your site, I think. So you can run it, and how many URLs you are actually testing. But when you test a URL, you need to test it many times. You need, yeah, you know, Google's recommendation is tested over 30 times, but at least 11 or something like that. So well, at least to get the metrics right, the timing metrics. So you have a kind of good median, because there's so many things that can happen when you actually test it.
In one of those dashboards, there was a reference to RUM data. So you platform also like real.
So that was actually saying RAM speed index. So inside WebPageTest, you have the speed index that they are actually they are recording the screen, and you can see how fast it's happening. And there you have open source that part also, so you can use it in your own tool or whatever. But they also, Pat has built a way of actually doing it JavaScript. It isn't perfect. It's the numbers aren't as good as doing a real video analyst of this video screen, but it's a way of doing it just in JavaScript. So that's what I'm using in SiteSpeed.io. Yeah, but you can do it, of course, Rumble it. But you need to have a way, since you're using Graphite and Grafana, so you can put the data. But there's something I don't know if it should be able to do it with like Boomerang if you just push the data down. Yeah. Yeah, so it depends. I've been using WebPageTest if I have like a scenario where I actually need to log in and so on. So then I used WebPageTest for that. If I used a couple of pages, it depends on what kind of data you're interested in. So do you want to have timing metrics, or are you keeping track of how many requests you're doing or? Yeah, I see. Yeah. For now, if it's checked and it's logged in, I would use WebPageTest. I think that's best, because then you will have quite okay numbers. It isn't working. I don't know if you have tried it with. You can write your own custom script, but sometimes it's hard to actually. The metrics the timing metrics maybe can be a little bit screwed sometimes. But I think that at least that's the best way of doing it. So. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, so I have a couple of stickers there, if you want, of SiteSpeed.io. And I actually also have 4 T-shirts, but it's in different sizes. So I have one really small one and then a little bit larger, so you can grab it if you want. Okay, thank you very much.